Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, Minister, now that you've confirmed that a mere 4 cabinet documents have been turned over to Madam Just Justice Hogue, how many cabinet documents are being withheld from her?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the specific number. Those are decisions that perhaps Madame Drouin could elaborate on, but I also think it's a fundamental principle.
It was just a simple question. How many documents have been withheld? You can't answer that. I find it astounding that a mere 4 documents have been turned over to Madam Justice Hogue that Madame Drouin said were deemed to be the most relevant. Who determined those documents to be the most relevant? The Prime Minister, the PCO, Madam Justice Hogue? Who determined that?
I did with your House Leader, Mr. Cooper, last summer.
I don't think that that is accurate. And since that time, Madam Justice Hogue has requested additional documents that are being withheld by your government, documents that go to the heart, potentially, about what the Prime Minister did or didn't do about foreign interference. I'm going to ask you a different question, because we know that you have confirmed when I asked you, by refusing to answer, that the Prime Minister will not turn over all of the documents requested by Madam Justice Hogue. But on another matter of concern, when you appeared at the Public Safety Committee, I asked you twice if you could provide the assurance that no one serving in Justin Trudeau's cabinet is among the MPs named in the NSICOP report who wittingly collaborated with a hostile foreign state. Twice you refused to answer that question, so I'm going to ask you a third time. Can you provide that assurance?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper has asked that question a number of times in committee and in the House of Commons. My answer remains the same. I took note of what Deputy Commissioner Flynn of the RCMP said when he testified yesterday before a committee as well. Getting into precisions with respect to specific intelligence information, including the numbers of people that may be a source of comments in various intelligence documents, is not something that we're permitted to do. And again, Mr. Cooper can ask the same question, but he's going to get the same answer, Mr. Chair.
In fact, the Prime Minister saw the NSICOP report. The Prime Minister made the final determination with respect to the redactions. The Prime Minister blacklisted the names of those MPs. So I'll ask you this. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states will be made public?
Mr. Chair, just to correct again another falsehood that Mr. Cooper asserted, that the Prime Minister made those redactions in the NSICOP report, I would draw him to comments of Alex Ruff, who made it very clear before the committee that none of the redactions of the NSICOP report were made by any political person, by a political staffer, by a minister, and the idea that the Prime Minister has a black marker and spends his time redacting the NSICOP.
You know it,
Mr. Cooper knows, Mr. Cooper knows, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper knows it's fake.
Hey. Okay. Just a minute here. First of all, the interpreters have a job to do. Second of all, there's no quality answer and no quality question that can be given or asked when we can't make out what's being said. I've stopped the clock. Minister, I'm going to give you the floor. If in about the next 15 seconds you can finish that response, Mr. Cooper, there's a minute 21 remaining. You'll have the opportunity to resume your line of questioning. Minister, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it's important not to assert something in a preamble to a question that's completely inaccurate, that his colleague clarified, and then move on to another question. It doesn't do a service for the public understanding of this issue.
Thanks, Minister. I'm going to restart the clock. A minute 21, Mr. Cooper.
Minister, answer the question. Can you provide the assurance that once Madam Justice Hogue completes her work, that the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, or any foreign state for that matter, wittingly and knowingly, will be made public?
Mr. Chair, I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to offer legal advice to a Court of Appeal Justice on what would be her obligations in terms of a public report with respect to national security information. Again, if you assert the falsehood in the question and ask for an answer, it doesn't make the premise accurate.
So you can't provide that assurance. Can you at least provide the assurance, given that the Prime Minister knows the names of the MPs who wittingly collaborated with hostile foreign states, including potentially MPs in the Liberal caucus, that none of those MPs will have their nomination papers signed by the Prime Minister to run in the next election? Will you provide that, at least that assurance?
Minister, we've got
if you're not going to be transparent in any other respect.
But 10 seconds to answer that, Mr.
So I think it might be more constructive for Mr. Cooper's leader to accept the government's offer to receive the security clearance and see the unredacted report that Mr. Cooper seems to be happy to talk about, not having seen it. It might be more useful if his leader saw the report, and then he might be able to make those very judgments that Mr. Cooper referred to a second ago.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Berthold, à vous, 5 minutes.
Monsieur Leblanc, fardeau de la
5 minutes. The burden of proof is on the shoulders of the Prime Minister and your government. Why? It's because you've been very nonchalant, at least on 3 occasions. The Prime Minister has refused to listen to the recommendations asking to publish documents or to provide information to MPs. And then secondly, there were lots of different attempts to refuse to answer questions. And then there was the nomination of a special rapporteur that really didn't work, and nobody had confidence in that. And now with Justice Hogue and with the preliminary report, we were quite right in not showing confidence and putting trust in the special rapporteur. And it seems that the most appropriate documents apparently are going to be handed over to Justice Hogue, according to the National Security Advisor. But by chance, the most relevant documents are, in fact, the documents that were covered by leaks by Mr. Bob Fife. So the 4 cabinet memoranda were the memoranda that appeared in the press. So, Minister, do the documents have to be leaked to the press so that they then become relevant for the Hogue Commission? First of all, Chair, and my friend Mr. Berthold, the answer is no. But I'd like to correct once again something, and Madame Drouin perhaps would like to add something. The leaks that we've seen did not refer to the 4 cabinet documents that we handed over to the Commission. So that really is a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. 4 other documents. There are other documents that should have been handed over, but were not handed over to Justice Hogue. How many documents have been handed over to her, and how many have not been handed over? You've been avoiding that question from the outset, and I'd like to cite Madame Drouin. She said, unfortunately, with the leaks, this has allowed the Commission to be very specific in its requests. So Justice Hogue has very specific documentation requests, and on the other hand, we're hearing that Justice Hogue does not have access to all documents. So, Minister Leblanc, why is your government so opaque and is not wanting to play this game of transparency to restore Canadians' confidence in the system? Response. Mr. Chair, I see that our colleagues are bursting out laughing with that comment from Mr. Berthold. It was a Liberal colleague who was laughing, says Mr. Berthold. He knows very well, Mr. Chair, that we've acted in good faith and we've been very transparent with the Hogue Commission. But, Chair, do you see the type of confusion that creeps in here? Mr. Berthold has asserted that these were cabinet documents that appeared in the press. In fact, they were documents from the security agencies that were covered by these leaks. And 46,000 documents of this type have already been handed over to the Hogue Commission. So there's a great deal of confusion, it seems, between the highly classified intel documents and, on the other hand, a few documents, as Mr. Harper already maintained as well during his time in government, that they're covered by cabinet confidence. Minister, I'll give the floor to Mr. Berthold. Thank you very much. So it's not time to talk about Mr. Harper. We're talking about you. We're talking about your government that from the outset has done everything it can to stop shedding light on foreign interference and has been covering up names and reported and is not taking action. And you're saying that these are documents that were not for the cabinet, but unfortunately the national security agencies wanted these documents to be read by the cabinet, Mr. Leblanc. That's where the confusion started. How can we trust the Liberals currently with that? We want to have confidence in Justice Hogue's report, so why are you refusing to give her access to all of the documents that she is requesting? Response, Mr. Chair, that's another example of this type of confusion. Our colleague, Mr. Berthold, is seen camouflaging, covering up the names, but following criminal legislation kind of doesn't mean that we're exactly camouflaging names. And then he refers to a parliamentary report. The Conservatives voted against the creation of the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The former government didn't set up any measures to bring about transparency, as we have seen right away in this very conversation today. And then to round off, Chair, I have full confidence in the work undertaken by Justice Hogue, and I have full confidence that her report is going to shed light and restore confidence for Canadians and give possible solutions to the government, and I hope also to the Parliament, to further reinforce our measures to counter foreign interference, as we've done since we came into power. Mr. Berthold, just a few seconds left. Mr. Berthold, just to specify something. The national report from NSICOP, which was published on the 5th of June, clearly stated that the Prime Minister and the government have withheld 1,000 documents from the committee by saying, or by using in an inappropriate way, cabinet confidences to avoid to render public this information. That's exactly what NSICOP said. And Mr. Leblanc, the confusion is on your side, I think, with everything we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of foreign interference. I think it's time to tidy up things and fully collaborate with the justice. If you want to have give an answer, Madame Drouin, quickly. Madame Drouin, we're certainly not talking about 1,000 cabinet memoranda. As senior officials, when we draw up a memorandum for the cabinet, there's several emails that are related to that. There's lots of different versions related to this memorandum to cabinet. There may be speaking points developed for respective ministers for the purposes of the cabinet discussion. So one file within the cabinet can generate an incredible panoply of various documents. So I'm very comfortable in affirming to you that we're not talking about 1,000 cabinet files as such. I'm extremely comfortable in saying that. And I'd like to repeat, please, quickly, Madame Drouin, in the Commission of Public Inquiry, there will be no intelligence documents from our security agencies have been withheld from the Commission. They have everything that they've asked for in terms of the work undertaken by our 2 main agencies. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Berthold. Thank you, Madame Drouin.